Chris DePerno was born in Ithaca, New York, where he joined the United States Marine Corps, being recruited and selected for the elite Marine Security Guard Battalion, um, the bodyguards to American diplomats and protection to embassies all over the world. During his deployment, he was assigned to Secretary of State Henry Kissinger's detail. He finished his tour, went back to college to earn a degree in criminal justice. At the same time, Chris was a member of the Army National Guard, where he was assigned as an intelligence sergeant specializing in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare, where he gave commanders battlefield briefings on the enemy's capabilities of the use of such weapons. Chris then joined the Ithaca Police Department, was sent to the FBI Academy to become a certified instructor and specialist in the use of force continuum. Chris taught at the Broome County Police Academy on crimes against children. Where he gave classes on basic criminal investigation. The Syracuse Police Academy on crimes against children. At the Syracuse Police Department, he became a detective and first assigned to the Abused Persons Unit, the Rape Task Force, and then transferred to the Criminal Investigation Division, where he was a case detective working and solving major crimes. He is a trained specialist interviewer and interrogator for the police departments. He's been awarded the Medal of Valor, the Kiwanis Police Officer of the Year, the Navy Commendation Medal, and other commendations. Chris finished 25 years of law enforcement career. He's now working in radio, producing, and being a host on different radio shows. So, has he jumped in yet? I don't see he's jumped in yet. So
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Oh, there he is. He's here. Okay, cool.
I'm here.
Cool. Glad
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. They won't let me share screen. I think you got to put me back on again.
I will. Yep, I'll get to that. So, okay. So I first met Chris. It was a number of years ago. He does these radio shows, and he had this idea, which I think is very valid, or this view that when it comes to MUFON, there's a lot of the stories that are very well known and cases that are well known. But he had this feeling that the real gold lies in the States. The States is where the real good stories are, where people know that. So he was reaching out to different state directors, such as myself, looking for what are the great stories in the state that people may not know about. So then he had me on his radio show. We talked about a few cases. And since then, we've continued our friendship. I've bumped into him at symposiums a few times. We call each other up every now and again for different reasons. And, you might think, okay, well, he was military. He was FBI, he was police officer. He's probably a very strict by the book, boring kind of straight up guy. And, there may be that part of him, but when you get right down to it, Chris is a very genuine, honest, caring, thoughtful guy. He's actually a lot of fun. He loves to get a laugh in. He's very approachable. He's just a very great person. His presentations are engaging, they're enjoying, and he always tries to insert some laughter into them. I've always liked knowing Chris, and whenever I get the chance to talk with Chris or meet with Chris, it's always been a good time. So I'm really excited to have him here talking about UFOs and the Nazi connection. So I'm hoping you're gonna like it too, because I'm sure it's gonna be fantastic. But yeah, I'm gonna go where I gotta find. Oh, there's Chris. So I'm gonna make you co-host. So I'm gonna make you co-host. You should get something say you can be co-host, and then you'll be able to share. But for now, then you'll be able to share the screen for everybody. But Minnesota MUFON, please welcome from New York State, Mr. Chris DePerno.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be with you this afternoon. This is a great treat for me because I just developed this program with Nazis and UFOs. Actually, it's called Hitler, the Nazis, the Vril, and UFOs, because we're going to cover all of that. And I'm still in the works of developing it, but I found this so interesting with what they did with propulsion way back in the 29s and 30s that we never even heard about. And in their science, they had a madman at the helm, unfortunately, who was probably the most evil man on the planet at the time. But the scientists were absolutely amazing when they started science. They took general science, they went, we're going to throw that away. And they said, this is the science that we're going to concentrate on. And it was more like, string theory, quantum mechanics, and things. And they were very, very good at it. They thought of ideas and they actually put it to work. And thank God that the German scientists at the time were so much into quality and not quantity, because if they had a lot of these jets A lot of these bombers that they developed and everything, if they mass produced them, that's one thing that they never really did was mass produce these different types of aircrafts and stuff. I mean, we could have had a different outcome of the war. It's just amazing of what they hid, what they had, and what we took from them. And so I wanted to develop a whole thing on it because nobody's really touched that subject. So I'm going to try to get my PowerPoint in here, and when I do, hold on one second here. That's not what I want, but I know what I got to do. I got to open it up first. All right, folks, give me a minute here. This is Albert Einstein. Of course, everybody knows that. And I wanted to get this picture of Albert because he was a wacko. He was a little bit of a wackadoodle in his times. There's no question about that. But he was brilliant. And when he developed Albert Einstein in 1905, when he was able to prove the theory that he was really working on time travel, he actually believed that the theory of relativity would work with time travel, E equals mc squared. And what happened with that, when he announced it, when he set out to say, hey, this is it, and people started looking at it, German scientists started flocking to that. In public eyes, this is an amazing thing, and I didn't know this. In public eyes, they denounced him. Absolutely thought he was terrible. They said his theories were wrong, that he was a terrible person. However, behind the scenes, they absolutely took all his theories and started working on it because he believed that, they believed that this was the way to go. So while they were doing that, as I said before, the German scientists, it was not the same as our time. They were so much more advanced and they didn't want to believe in conventional science. And so they started studying things like quantum mechanics, string theory, and that was their science they wanted to concentrate on. Their question was, they really wanted to develop a wormhole. So back in 1929, 1930, these guys were thinking, hey, maybe for space travel, we can develop a wormhole. And I don't think we even talked about wormholes here until, maybe like the 47, 52, somewhere around there, when we actually had these scientists like Werner von Braun and some of the others that we got from the United States. So they believed that it was possible for space travel. They always believed that, and they thought that that was the way to go. And it really started when the Germans were so obsessed with the scientific technology, and they were so advanced that at least 30, 50 years, they were ahead of everybody else. Everybody else was the key people. So with that, they developed the V2 rocket, and we'll talk about that a little later. So I want to go to this guy right here, because this guy is still important. They're still talking about his theory today. This guy is Theodore Franz Eduard Kaluza. Has anybody ever heard of the Kaluza-Klein theory? It's like particles that CERN can actually, they're believing that they could start developing it. And we have 4 dimensions. And in the 4 dimensions, we can do whatever we want. But we believe that with either time travel or space travel, we have to get to that 5th dimension. And you can't do it without using the Kaluza-Klein theory to be able to make particles to open up that hole to do it. And this is an actually thing that they're working on now. But this guy, he was born in 1885. He died in 1954. He was a German mathematician, a physicist, and he started the Kaluza-Klein theory, which involved equations for 5-dimensional space travel. His idea with that was fundamental forces can be unified by introducing additional dimensions where reused, which later was for string theory. So he was actually the first developers of string theory and trying to see if he can work with a 5th dimension. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if they actually accomplished that back in the 30s and 40s, how a different world we would have lived in and stuff? And these guys, as like I said, as mad as these leaders were, they had some of the most brilliant scientists in the world at the time. So that, with that in mind, you know, the Kaluza-Klein theory is a classical unified theory for gravitation and electromagnetism. Remember that word? We've all heard it now. Electromagnetism, built around the idea of the fifth dimension, beyond the common four dimensions of space and time, and considered an important precursor to string theory. So these guys were working, and the theory was, if you could make these small particles, and if these particles were adjusted right, that you could actually enter a fifth dimension. And some people think that space travel is being done by extraterrestrials using this theory, that they pop in and out of dimensions. So some people say, wow, the craft was over here. How many sightings that all of you have investigated where somebody says, well, it was over here, and the next thing you know, the ship was over here? Well, the theory now is, some people are thinking that they're not just speed of light going across that way, they're popping in and out of a dimension. And so they can pop into a dimension, pop out of the dimension back in ours, and be able to do it at more than light speed. Incredible. So, all right, so let's go on to this guy here. All right, so we talked about that, and here's the guy that really is the guy that I call him the top scientist. Everybody talks about Wernher von Braun. Wernher von Braun. You know, he's the guy that developed the rockets. This guy here was Wernher von Braun's mentor, and he was brilliant. Her name is Hermann Julius Oberth. He was a scientist. He was amazing, and he started talking. He's actually considered the father of rocketry. So Oberth, upon his inaugural award, he got a Herschel Award from the French Astronomical Society. This honor recognized his significant contributions to the field of aeronautics and interplanetary travel. You know when this was? 1929. 1929, this guy was writing books about interplanetary travel and be able to do it. He knew there was ways to do this, and he was actually studying that. And not only did he do that, he wrote a book on it. Let's see if I can get that book up here. And this is him getting his award. And right next to him is his student. This is his student, Wernher von Braun, and stuff. And so everything that Wernher worked on or learned from, he learned from this guy over here. But this is the book he wrote. He wrote The Rocket into Planetary Space. And they were talking about, and look, I want you to look at the face of the book. If you look at that design that's right there, what do you think SpaceX and Blue Origin and everybody else are designing? The same type of capsule. It was amazing. We looked at it, we tried to debunk it, and so far we couldn't debunk the way their capsule was being made and the capsule on this book and back in 1929. And so, I mean, and actually, and I apologize, he wrote this book in 1923. He got his award in 1929 and stuff. So he designed the Model B two-stage rocket. They were actually designing two-stage rockets at that time. And so I got to tell you, he's the guy that I think outpaced Wernher von Braun. Now, here's what they designed as a two-stage rocket that they were doing. Now, remember, their rocket that they developed, though it was weaponized, and it was a terrible thing. It destroyed a lot of things because obviously the military took over the project. But the rocket that they did actually hit the very edge of outer space. So technically, they were the first ones to conquer space. Everybody said the Soviets with Sputnik and this and that. It was the German scientists that actually hit the top, or I should say, the first layer of space. And of course, because they're enemies of everybody, which they should be, they were never recognized for it. So, but here's the one thing that I like, and we are still trying to figure this guy out and stuff. Herman says, we cannot, remember Werner von Braun with that famous line, we can't take credit, we had help. And everybody say, oh, Werner von Braun, he did this, and he must have got help from the extraterrestrials. It was Herman Oberst that actually said this first. We cannot take credit for our record advancement in certain scientific fields alone. We have been helped. He was the first one to actually say that, not Werner von Braun. But he went on to allude that the help was from extraterrestrials. And so we try to say, well, where do the extraterrestrials come into play with these guys and stuff? So Herman decided he's going to start the Society Space Travel. So after he gets recognized as a father of rocketry and stuff, he gets probably the great scientists from all over Germany, and they start working on space travel right back then. And of course, we got a picture of Werner here, who, I don't know if people know this, but Werner von Braun was the SS Nazi colonel. He killed a lot of people. We brought him over here, gave him a great job and a wonderful salary and stuff. This guy was killing people over in Germany because he had, I think, around 250,000 people that were slaves and prisoners that he just allowed to work on Piedemonde and all these other places. So as much as we recognize him as a great person that got us into space, he was pretty much evil. And this is the Saturn V that he developed that got us there. The only question I have is, if these guys were so successful in Germany, now think about this, because we had a group, we had a discussion about this. If they were so successful in Germany making these rockets, why is it that all the rockets that he developed here blew up at first? They couldn't get rockets off the ground. They started blowing up. And we go, wait a minute, this guy had successful rockets in Germany, but yet when he came to the United States, every freaking rocket that he was working on blew up until later on when he developed, the Saturn program, rockets started to work. And everybody does not have nobody to this date has an answer for that. So we kind of question of that. So in 1936, let me get my point here. Where are we? In 1936, there's alleged UFO crash in the Black Forest of Germany. Now, nobody really knows if that happened or not, but there's a lot of talk about the UFO crashing in 1936 in Germany. But here's the amazing thing. After that crash, there was a tremendous scientific boost in propulsion in Germany. So we kind of say, wait a minute, this might happen because these are brilliant scientists that actually started working on reverse engineering, and all of a sudden their propulsion. So remember, in 1936, a lot of us were still using biplanes. And these guys were making some incredible designs for propulsion systems for jet engines. They were working on them right after 1936 and even before. So, they had to work it. So here's our man, Hitler, the madman. And did he have help? Did he actually have help from extraterrestrials? Well, some people actually say yes, because of their technology being so advanced at the time that the war took off. So there's no absolute proof of that, but I will tell you, I have strong feelings that something happened, because as we go on, you will see how much technology they had in the 30s and the early 40s. It was just incredible. All right, so who's our next guy here? So this is a picture of what they believe was going to be a craft that they were working on. Now, the German writer John Van Helsing described the discovery of the crash saucer in the Black Forest near Friedenberg in 1936, and said the technology was taken, combined with the information from the Vril Society. And we're going to get to the Vril Society because that plays a big part in not only uh, propulsion systems or anti-gravity, but also with the way they shaped the nation in Germany at the time. So the Vril Society had received through channeling, they said this was done through channeling, is made into a further project called the Habanu. Now, nowadays, we really believe that remote viewing is possible because, Hal Puthoff has worked on the Operation Stargate. They said that it was very successful. It's been known. A lot of people now actually teach it. You have the Monroe Institute that works with it. The Nazis were doing what they considered remote viewing back in the 30s and from the Vril Society. And so they were actually thinking that this society was such as an occult as the Aryan nation kind of thought that they were a civilization that was put there for one reason, and that was to rule the earth and stuff. So here we go. So now the Vril Society starts working on anti-propulsion, and this is after the crash or alleged crash in 1936. Now, who was the Vril Society? The Vril was a German nationalist group that combined the political ideas and the order of Illuminati with the Hindu mystical and Kabbalah. So now we hear about mystical, Kabbalah is here, Kabbalah is there, all over the United States and everything else. But back then, they actually, said the Vril Society was a cabal. They were transforming Germany, then they wanted to transform Europe. And that was what? It was one of the most influential of the occult groups in post-World War I Germany. And many Germans' social elite were members. Now, you had to be an elite in order to get into the Vril Society. You had to be indoctrinated. And another occult person besides Hitler. Hitler was so much into the occult, so much into outer space. He actually said to Himmler, and Himmler was right there with him. He was also into the occult. They actually built a castle. And all the elites, all the high military people had to be indoctrinated into this outer space program, extraterrestrial program, and a program of mystical occults. And if you were not indoctrinated, you weren't in the top society of it. So that's one of the things that they were working on there. So the Vril Society, also known as the Lodge of Light, the society believed that technology supported utopia with an energy called Vril, and the latent source of energy that was spiritually elevated hosts that were able to master through training of their will. So this society actually studied a lot of the occult. Not only like I said, they had to indoctrinate high-level people into the party, but they were actually tons of scientists in the Vril Society that they said, go ahead and start working on propulsion there. So the Vril believed that where they were an Aryan race, that they were descendants of gods of Nordic gods. So this is one of the things they thought. They didn't think they were placed here as humans. They were placed here as Nordic gods. And that was part of the indoctrination. And are the descendants of them and lived there. The descendants had inherited the knowledge of virology and an energy source that the gods, that they could become the masters of the world and become a race of superhumans through that. So that's why they basically kind of looked down at everybody else except them. The Vril members were supposedly the first group to attempt back-end engineering of an extraterrestrial spacecraft. So they were so powerful in Germany at the time that the Vril Society says, we'll take your engineers, we'll take your scientists, and we will oversee this project of back engineering a crash saucer. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of evidence that they had succeeded in anti-gravity. And the designs that they had, some of it was propulsion systems, but some of them, and we all know about the Glock, and we'll get to the Glock later on in the program here, but the thing that they were working on was time travel. They really believed they could conquer time travel, and they really believed they could conquer space travel with anti-gravity. All right, let's see what we got here. All right, so we had enough about the drill and stuff. So let's go to this one here, 21. So the real members were supposedly the first group to attempt back engineering, which I said, but there was a project that they called the Habernu 2, Habernu 1, and Habernu 2. This is believed to be the UFO project developed by Nazi Germany during World War II. They were actually working on this in World War II, and some say they were successful, but they couldn't get it into mass production. And they had the idea that they could actually conquer anti-gravity, and if they were able to mass produce what we believe they developed, the outcome of the war could have been totally different and stuff. So with that said, although we don't know if Habernu 2 ever existed, we do know that they were working on the propulsion system, as the Germans kept these projects so secret that they killed people over. Now, I will tell you this. In Poland, they had built an underground city, we'll get to that, was so mass, and that they absolutely were working on different things like anti-gravity and propulsion systems. But what happened was they went from the Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe was in control of this, but it was taken away from Hermann Goering, and it was given to the SS. And the SS put in one of their most, I would say, evil colonels there was, Hans Kemmler. And Hans Kemmler, when he saw that the war was being lost, he blew the whole place up. He killed everybody, including the scientists. He took all the diagrams, everything were supposedly taken by him, and he disappeared. And to this day, nobody really knows where Hans Kemmler went to. Some believe actually that he was actually taken by the Americans, and that he had these designs and stuff for him, that he was able to come into the United States and live secretly here in the United States. I have seen no evidence of that, but there's word out there that that's what happened. So let's get on with this. This is one of the pictures of a possible design. Now, this is not an actual photograph, folks. I'm not going to tell you this is actual photograph, but this is a design, what we believed was what they were making. Because the distinct thing was, as you could see, they wanted twin cannons up on the top. That we do know that they were trying to work on to do that. And this was done by a propulsion system, not anti-gravity, what the designs are. And we'll get into what the designs were there. But declassified CIA files that were completed interviews with German engineer George Klein, who's part of that theory, from between March and May 20th of 1952 revealed claims that the Nazis had flying saucers that could reach heights of 12,400 meters in 3 minutes with speeds up to 2,500 miles per hour. Nazi flying saucers appeared twice in the CIA's trove of documents as part of their investigation into the UFOs. Klein's testimony was published in newspapers in Greece, Iran, and the Congo. I'm not sure why they published them in Iran and the Congo, but hey, that's what we found out. So this is an idea of what the Habernu 1, Habernu 2, and Habernu 3 look like. And you look at the shapes of them, we didn't think circular shapes would be aerodynamic at one time. Then all of a sudden, we started slowly going into circular shapes. If you start looking at our technology, what we're doing now, it's either triangle or partial circular shapes that we're starting to develop. And the Germans were already doing this. All right, so yeah, let's see what we got here. The Wunderwaffe, or whatever he wanted to call it, his wonder weapons. So anything that they were working on, the Germans wanted to weaponize it. So if it was anything of propulsion or energy systems or whatever, it automatically went to the Department of their Department of Army. It was taken over by the SS, and these scientists were literally almost kidnapped, um, and forced at some point time forced to work on these projects for weaponization. Now, Hitler orders to not only develop, but here's one of the things that we discovered, and I never knew this until I started looking into this. The Nazis had obtained ancient texts and religious writings and painstakingly studied them. Hitler was into the occult, and he believed Hinduism and Buddhism was the way to go. So he sent agents out all over the world to look for these type of ancient scrolls and different types of ancient relics that in religious nature that he could use or channel whatever power he thought they could do with these type of things. So they were able to get their hands on religious writings and studied them. And Hitler was so intrigued by the Hindu and Buddhist religion that he went out and tried to get everything he could to get it. And the other thing is that this guy here, he was really into the occult. This crazy man, like I said, he built a castle to study. They had a secret castle that was built that would study everything from the occult. And how Nazi high command people were sent to this castle to learn it, because their belief was that if they can do supernatural things, they can work on flying saucers, they would control the world. All right. So what are you plans? So in 1938, the Nazis were already to start designing and developing underground bases for their experiments and productions of wonder weapons. And they were called U-plants. So what Hitler did was, once he conquered Poland, once he had Piemonte, and once he had these places, they started developing underground plants. And these things were huge cities. I mean, it wasn't like there was just like an acre, 2 acres. They had developed cities underground. And the thing that they wanted to do was keep everything that they had developed or were developing out of the sight of people. So other countries, and just like we do nowadays, we don't want other countries to get our technology. Hitler was designing these plants so no other country could get the technology that they wanted. And now we'll go to this guy here. So the first design came from Heinrich Falk, co-founder of the Falk-Wolf Company. He was developing Hoover technology, jet propulsion, and the Messerschmitt. He started working on projects that would be jet propulsion type of stuff. And so his company started working on that. And eventually, with the help of other companies, they developed the Messerschmitt 262. Now, the reason I go with this and say that propulsion systems they first started with is because the Nazis started taking types of propulsions as they were working in the same time as anti-gravity. So what they did, they actually did what we do nowadays. They compartmentalized things. They said, you guys are working on this over here, you guys are going to work on this over here, and never the two will meet in the middle. And so they were very, very, best way to say it is scared about leaking out their technology that they were having. So, and of course, then we have, the flying wing. All right. We had the two brothers that started doing the flying wing. And let me just get here. So this is the Horton 229 flying wing. So the Horton brothers actually developed a flying wing, the design of a flying wing. And they actually in model of it, because we know that we have recovered this partial flying wing and started reversing this technology when we got it. And some say Kenneth Arnold's sighting. You remember Kenneth Arnold had the sighting that looked like a boomerang or a flying wing they was talking about? That may very well have been our technology that we reverse engineered from the Soviet, not the Soviets, but the Nazis. And of course, what have we done now? We make our own flying wings that look like the B-2 bomber, and they very much look like the same and stuff. And here, this is the Flesher F1-103 flying bomb. This is actually the first remote drone that we did. So they actually had drone technology. They called it a flying bomb, but it was really drone technology back years during the 40s with the war. These things would have a certain amount of gas. They were able to guide them in a certain way and be able to drop it. Now, why do I say that this was drone technology? Because the word is that we took this type of technology and we made it into remote technology ourselves. Now, we had a project, and I'm going off a little bit here, but this is why technology has been hidden. So the Department of Defense, the CIA, wanted to take over Cuba. And they actually were able to build a large, I think it was a 727, 747, a large airliner, remote control it. Now, this is back in the 50s. Remote control it to near Cuban airspace, have tape recordings of people screaming and hollering, going, they're killing us, they're trying to blow us up, there's missiles, and then blow the aircraft up electronically. It was called Operation Northwood, Project Northwood. And Kennedy, when he saw this, he absolutely went after the CIA. He thought this was insane. He wouldn't have anything to do with this, and he threw it right off the drawing board. And the CIA was very upset because they thought this would be a good plan to take over Cuba. So just a little bit of history there. So where we go now, the V-2 rocket, we talked about the V-2 rocket there. And like I said, the V-2 was developed to go to the limits of outer space, right at the edge of it. It was a two-stage rocket. And like I said, the one thing that nobody could answer, and I'm still saying this, maybe one of you guys could answer it. Why in God's name were they so proficient with these rockets? And they were very much proficient with it, that they didn't blow up over there. Very few blew up. I mean, obviously they had some that, didn't make it to England or, had problems. But in fact, all the beginning of the rocket styles that we had here from these German scientists were destroyed or blown up. So, once again, there's another flying wing that we're looking at. And let's get to 38. So also we'll be developing, we're going to start talking about the weapon to change the course of world history. They believed was the Glock or the Bell. And its code name was called the Kronos, meaning Titan of God. So they were working on this thing as a propulsion system, not a craft. At first, the Glock was nothing more than the design of a propulsion system. This was supposed to be put into a craft and be able to maneuver this craft. But they thought it would be an actual craft itself. And to this day, nobody can tell me why they had these. If you look at this PowerPoint, you see these markings. Well, the Glocks allegedly had all these mystical markings on them, and nobody to this day can tell me, and I don't know, what these markings stood for. So they developed this program called the Bell. This was believed to be their first anti-gravity propulsion program. It was believed that they could disrupt space and time with this, and to get into space and slow down time by producing incredible speeds for travel. and they, like I said, they call it Project Cronus. And like I said, every picture that I've seen of the Glock at the bottom here, they've always had these markings. And I have not been able to get somebody to give me a good answer. I don't think we know for sure. I don't think we know, but we do know that the Glock was supposed to be designed or believed to be under the idea of what the Buddhist and Hindu religion was, what they called the Verma, and the possibility of Texas describing flying machines back in India. So years and years ago, you always hear about, years ago they had flying machines, they had wars in the sky and everything. Well, there is actually texts that talk about, Buddhist texts, Hindu religion texts, talk about flying machines that were in a war. And it was what they believe, from what they understand, a nuclear war in India, or right above India, or by the Indian borders. So this is one of the things why he was so intrigued by this, because he believed if he could master the idea of getting a nuclear weapon and be able to do space and time and anti-gravity, he would conquer the world. All right. So this is the one thing about this. We look at these designs here. I found this picture, which they believe were the designs that were on the bell. And let me just ask this, if anybody knows, can I ask this, Tom, during the thing? Does anybody have any idea what these designs could be?
Yeah, and if you do know, put them in the chat. But when you first showed it, though, it occurred to me that it looks kind of like what Jim Peniston at the Rendlesham incident. He said there was markings on that object that he touched. So
and now some people are saying that was actually our stuff, and that they were actually working on time travel. I don't know. I do know that Jim Peniston was injured after this. And also, you're right, Tom, he did remark about some strange writings or designs that were on that craft. All right. So.
And again, too, the Roswell, some of the supposed I-beams from the Roswell had unusual markings on them, too. So there's that.
Yeah. So, I mean, but nobody to this day can tell me, oh, that's Sumerian writing, or that's Hindu writing, or whatever. I've asked known experts, and they go, Chris, I don't know. Doesn't look like anything that we've ever seen. So, all right. So NASA is working on lift of rotating cylinders. There's we're going to get to him, but they are now working on what they call rotating cylinders propulsion. And this is something that I pulled up here, that they believe in certain ways of water and be able to, with gas, they can make a type of energy force that they could actually, they believe, could be anti-propulsion or anti-gravity propulsion with that. So now, one of the things the Nazis said that they had developed was believed to be a purposeless liquid, metallic-looking substance that was supposed to be highly radioactive and codenamed Xenon 525, that was able to create lift. Now, why do I say this, and why did I put this in here? There was a military person who's been on several shows, and I can't think of his name right now. I'm having a brain meltdown. But he remembers going to a crash, and he described a purplish-looking metallic liquid oozing from the craft. Now, if this is true, then we want to find out if the Xenon 525 was actually legitimately invented. Now, remember, everybody said that element 115 was not made, but Bob Lazar, said 20 years ago it was, and now we believe that element 115 is real. So the problem that they had was, from what I've read, is this Xenon 525 was very, very unstable, and it was part of the Glock's makeup. And that's why when they tested it, as you can see, when they tested it outside, they had chains around this circle, concrete circle. Now, some people said, oh, Chris, that is the base of a water tower. So I went around looking at old water towers. I have never seen a base like this. And so I kept saying, well, if it's a water tower, we got to have some here or something like that. And I've never seen a water tower that looked like this. However, we do know that they had hookups that you could have used large chains to hold something down. Because remember, although the Glock was, they believe, was successful, it was totally unstable. And so they had not figured a way to make it stabilized at this period of time. And I'll tell you, if they did do that, I believe that the war would have been simply just a different outcome and stuff. And it's, like I said, the picture of the chains put there like that. All right, so let's get to number 49. So, as I said before, this is an actual picture that we found, and we're going to vet it to make sure that it's real. But what we found, that's what's been done, is right there, you could see the outline of the Glock right at the top. You see the top dome, and right directly in the middle down there, you can see a bell-shaped object. So we believe, with the help of the Vril and this, that was going to be their anti-propulsion system, the Glock, and be put into a disc-shaped craft. Now, like I said, I haven't vetted this picture yet. I can't find out if it's the actual truth or not, but I've seen it on other programs. I've seen other people say that it is legit. And so I'll put it out there. If anybody thinks it's not, or anybody has information, please come talk to me about it, because listen, nobody is an expert in the field of ufology. Anybody tells you they're an expert in ufology, you better run away, because none of us are. I mean, we're learning something every single day. We're still students in this. All right, so who's this guy? All right. So this is Anthony Fokker, known for his Fokker airplane. Remember the Fokker Airplane Company. So in 1929, Fokker had received a patent for a circular design aircraft with twin rotors. He was actually starting to develop the first helicopter there, and he was actually working on twin engine propulsion for it. And this thing would be able to stand still, fly around, and come to a halt, go up, straight down. And, you know, the design was they would have a combustion chamber. It looked partially like a jet, but it would have a circular motion. So what did we do? Well, years later, okay, people said that there was such a craft like this at the air base in Ohio, Wrights-Patterson. So people have said, hey, we saw something very similar to that design at Wrights-Patterson that the USA Air Force was developing at the time. So, you know, did they take Nazi technology? Did they take stuff that they found and started converting it? So here's the guy that I'm really trying to work on right now. And let's get him. This is Victor Schallenberg. The scientists that always believed that he was involved with UFO type crafts. We definitely believe this guy was a genius. He was an absolute genius. And he came to the attention of Hitler in 1934. He formulated a unique theory of hydrodynamics. Now, this guy, he was kind of a conservationist, and he always wanted to study nature, which he did. But he started working on the power of water. And he formulated a unique theory of hydrodynamics, that the inward moving and twisting of water vortex held the secret to a usefulness and benefit according to physics, and built upon one another in a system that is coordinated and phased together. Bigger and bigger forces are released when water is allowed to build. So he was able to work on a project where he took water, was able to use its energy in such a way that it would have great propulsion power and stuff. His prototype was codenamed and I'm gonna butcher this name, but it's Beluzio Shriver Hogning Discus. Sorry, folks, I can't pronounce it well. And stuff. The craft is believed to have traveled at 1,800 miles an hour and reaching over 40,000 feet, and believe a successful test was done and conducted based on his theory. So the German technician Rudolf Schreiber, he gave an interview with German news magazines. Let me pull him up here. This guy right here, he gave an interview. He gave to German news magazine Der Spiegel, in which he claimed that he had designed a craft powered by a circular plane of rotating turbine blades. Now, what he did is probably take Schellenberg's ideas and started working on turbine engines, and using that type of aerodynamics was able to be successful with it. There's 2 flights that they say they actually were able to do. They did one coming out of Poland and one coming out of Italy. And they said they were both successful with anti-gravity propulsion with that. So Schreiber said that the project had been developed by him and his team at BMW's Prague Works until April 1945, when he fled to Czechoslovakia. His design for the disc and model were stolen from his workshop, and that was done in 1948. So probably we're the ones that probably stole it. And here's something from the newspaper that actually was there, that he was designing, and he claimed this thing flew. Now, if you notice in the PowerPoint, I wanted to make sure that you realize some people say it was anti-gravity, but here he's got jet propulsion systems on it. Now, were the jet propulsion system working with a primitive anti-gravity to push it along? Maybe he was able to get lift. Okay, our theory is that maybe he was able to get lift, but he couldn't go fast, forward, backwards, whatever, without some type of propulsion system. So we were very intrigued by what this was done. So I believe he designed such a craft, but I think he had to use both technologies in order for it to work. And another look at the craft, you could see that there was 2 propulsion systems to it. But the amazing thing was they were working on disc-shaped objects instead of wing objects, and they were believed to be successful with it. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. Now, I'm going to go back to this guy here. So this is Hans Kimmler. And this guy here, he got command of all the anti-gravity and propulsion systems for Germany. Now, the guy was one of those guys where he said, hey, he took probably 300,000 slave workers, killed them all, after they were done. And then he had scientists working around the clock to be able to work on rocket systems, propulsion systems, and anti-gravity. And as I said before, this guy, when he knew the war was starting to go bad, said, you know what, to hell with this. I'm going to blow everything up and kill everybody here so I can bargain with the Americans or the Russians and have the designs on me, or keep them in a place where I can tell them where they are so I can bargain for my life, because he would have been charged with a war crime and probably hung. But who knows? I mean, we took all these scientists in Operation Paperclip, and we brought them here, and they had great lives. And these guys were killers. And so he's possibly living in Russia or living somewhere is a good life if he had all those plans. So, talk about this guy. And that here. So in December in 1938, German scientist Otto Hahn and his assistant Fritz Strassmayer sent a manuscript to the German Science Journal, reported that they had detected and identified the element barium after bombarding uranium with neutrons. Now, why do I bring this up? Because some people think that we have developed anti-gravity by nuclear propulsion. And these guys were working on nuclear reactors, nuclear studies back in the 30s. And they believed that they had conquered, by bombarding uranium with neutrons, that they were able to get great power from it. Let's get this guy up here. So now the Nazis had their own atomic program. They had their own atomic program. We all know that they were making heavy water. And Dr. Werner Heisenberg had advancements in the program. We know that Dr. Heisenberg was trying to develop a nuclear reactor. He was captured by the Americans and interrogated, along with other advanced things. So they were actually having nuclear reactors built. This is an actual photograph of a dismantling of a nuclear reactor in Germany. Now, the problem was that these guys were actually on the cusp of having nuclear reactors functional, which means, and then they wanted to mineralize these things to the point where they can put them in crafts or ships or whatever. And a lot of our Americans died of radiation poisoning because we really didn't understand radiation poisoning at this time. And so guys were catching, radiation poisoning and dying. So here's these guys that have no protective gear. Some of them are just barehanded and stuff, and they're working around a nuclear reactor. And let's see what we got here. And that brings me to the Americans. So World War II is over with. We all get these scientists that bring them over for Operation Paperclip. This is Captain Rupert. He became a colonel, but at the time he was captain of Project Blue Book, and commented about the Nazis' advancement in aviation. So he goes on to say, when World War II ended, the Germans had several radical types of aircraft and guided missiles under development. The majority were in the most preliminary stages, but they were only known craft that could even approach the performance of objects reported to be UFOs. So they actually, Colonel Rupert actually admitted that the scientists were so advanced that people would mistake these as UFOs because their propulsion systems work. And this is why I believe they actually conquered this and had test flights, because here's a colonel, American colonel, that denied at times UFOs didn't exist, but he's acknowledging that the German scientists had stuff that you would mistake it as a UFO. And of course, we all know this. Now, there's a theory. I don't know if I believe this. I've argued this with people. I remember an article being done by Leslie Klein that the Russians took some of these German scientists, and they also were able to conquer anti-gravity. And they were able to, from what was read, now, like I said, I don't take a lot of stock into this, but the ship that crashed in Roswell was actually a Russian, and the Soviets had gotten disformed children and actually put them into the craft to make it look like they were extraterrestrials. If that is true, I haven't seen anything of it. People talk about that. People say that, this was a man-made stuff out of Russia. And now they've come out and said that the actual product that was in the MUFON Journal, right, Tom? The last article in the MUFON Journal had Roswell, that it wasn't a craft. They're now saying it was a weather balloon.
Yeah, the whole weather balloon thing, can't escape that. So
yeah, I mean, and I don't believe that, because I'll tell you, this guy here, Marcel, what people don't realize, he was an expert in radar. Besides being the intelligence officer, the most highly advanced air command there was, he was read into the weather balloon project, or the high balloon project. He had a top secret clearance. He was an intelligence officer. He had to know when those balloons were going over, because he was a radar expert and had to work with radar at the base. So, I mean, obviously he knew when those balloons were working. So for him to say that it was not a craft, I totally believe him that Roswell was a craft. It was extraterrestrial, or maybe it's one of our crafts that we designed from reverse engineering, and we did, because remember, there was many crash landings reported all over the world before Roswell, and I'm sure we got our hands on some of that stuff and was working on that, during time. Now, this is an actual Dick Hexberg landing, but the idea is that the witnesses from Kecksburg say that it was an acorn shape or bell type of shape object that crashed there. Now, some people say it was a Soviet satellite, but what I found out is that this object that landed in Kecksburg changed directions. Now, Soviet satellites don't change direction. When they fall to Earth, they fall right straight down at an angle and crash. But this thing made 2 or 3 different directional changes before it landed, and that just doesn't happen. But here, I'll show you this. So they have a statue outside of Kecksburg where they have what they believe was the object. Now, here's the amazing thing about this. If you see in the picture, they put strange markings on this, which makes me believe that possibly it was a Bell propulsion type of system that was actually crashed there. Because if the Bell propulsion system was actually working, anti-gravity at the time, and we took their scientists and worked on this, and we had a test flight, and this thing just like that one case down in Texas where they had to dig up the road and everything, Chase Landrum, the Chase Landrum case. This is another project that probably went awry and did not work. Anyways, here's our people from Operation Paperclip that we brought in, and Herman Obers, Werner von Braun, and their rockets that they developed for the United States. These guys here, and they had a good life after they killed all these people in Germany. And of course, engineers claim saucer plans are in the Soviet hands. Sightings were in Africa, Iran, and Syria. So there is talk that the actual Russians got a hold of some of the scientists that were working on anti-gravity at the time, and they were able to produce it. Now, I'm going to end this with one thing. A very known aviation person told me, he says, Chris, you know the Nimitz project? I go, yeah, everybody knows about the Nimitz sightings and everything. He goes, the Tic Tacs are ours. I go, I don't think so. No, they're ours. He says, we've worked on anti-propulsion, we've conquered it, and we're able to do it. And so he says, start looking at it. So I met up with a person who very knowledgeable in aircrafts. He's flown aircrafts for test pilots. He's done it for the Coast Guard, and he still works with high-level companies now with that, and he truly believes it's ours. So the Tic Tacs, we're still going to be looking into that to see if they're ours. And with that, I run through the thing. Any questions?
And you should all be able to unmute yourself, so feel free to unmute yourself.
Go ahead, beat me up.
I'm sure I can't imagine that people don't have questions, so throw them at them. Let's see what you got.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. I've done a lot of study of Victor Schauenberger and his living water theories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I may have some information there for you.
Great, go ahead.
And Einstein started in the patent office.
Yeah.
And before World War II, the Germans sent out people to investigate patent offices around the world looking for things that they could use.
You are correct.
And von Braun said that their liquid rocket technology was based on Goddard's work.
Based on what?
Goddard's work in the U.S.
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. I know Vern von Braun. The thing that we all wanted to look at Vern von Braun is what was his early studies of rocketry here in the United States. because we believe that it was different from German rocketry, because the scientists were in Germany were so advanced and so precise, and that didn't happen here. It's the same guys. So how is it that they can create a two-stage rocket here that was successful several times over, and yet when they came here in the United States, they for many times they were unsuccessful. It just didn't make sense.
Disinformation.
Disinformation as far as their rocketry blowing up.
Yeah, they wanted to keep this down. They didn't want it to get out.
Well,
Schallenberger, in his private notes, complained that they wouldn't let him talk about UFOs because the Nazis wanted to keep that secret.
oh yeah, oh absolutely, I agree with you that they if they recovered in 1936 from the Black Forest down craft, they absolutely kept the secret. And the word was that they were able to get a living being out of it. And supposedly, for what Herman Oberst says, and Werner von Braun said the same thing, except Herman Oberst actually said that the help that they got was not from here. Now, he didn't elaborate, but he did say that the help that they got was not from here. So there's a couple theories about that. And if you look at what was it, Werner von Braun wrote a book, and he wrote a book about traveling to Mars. And do you know who his main character in the book was?
Oh,
Elon.
yeah.
So there's a theory out there that Elon Musk, somewhere in the future, and I'm not saying this is right, but somewhere in the future, Elon is able to conquer time travel. And in order for rocketry to be done, he goes back in time. Now, it's just kind of strange that he would make a book in regards to having Elon as his main character, because that's just not a common name.
That's true. I'm trying to think here now. I had a thought and I just lost it. There's other things like in the U.S. I don't know whether you looked into T.T. Brown's work and his notes, but T.T. Brown back in the 30s had a flying disc that he demonstrated to the Navy, and he was commissioned in the Navy because his disc it was on a gimbal balance arm type of thing, and it flew around in its little circle at about 4,000 miles per hour using electrostatics.
James Goodall said back in the 50s and 60s, we've conquered Mach 14.
Yeah, I would believe it.
Yeah, they're not manned crafts.
No.
But we do have, back then we did have crafts that went to Mach 14, which tells me that we were able to do remote controlled drones back there. And when we found out about Project Northwood, which is a legitimate project the CIA did, we had to have that technology in order for them to fly a plane to the outer side of Cuba in order to try to start a war with them.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go with it next. Francis Bittner, or Bitter, I should say, wrote a book, Magnetism, the Education of a Physicist. Now, if you're going to look that up, you need to look at the original version, the first edition of it. As with most of the books, you're going to have to look at the first edition. Like Living Water, you're going to have to find the first edition, which came out of England.
You know, I will tell you this, sir, that I believe water is a key element to what is going on with the whole ufology field. Because I remember it was Lou Alessandro they wanted to ask him a question about hydrogen converted to helium or the take of hydrogen molecules from water and stuff. He would not answer that question. He would not go there.
We did a demo. Aaron Tank did a demo, that's up on Minnesota MUFON, of converting hydrogen directly to helium.
Right, helium-4.
And it releases neutron radiation. And I was involved in a number of I was a lab rat for a number of Cal Put-Us projects from the 70s through the 80s. And I have information on that. And if Tom can give me an address for you,
I'll give you my phone number. You can call me.
I can actually mail you my book about that, because they won't allow me to print it. Or you can have Tom give me your phone number and do it.
Tom, feel free to give my phone number to anybody.
You got it. I always do, man. I go walking on the street.
Yeah.
Hey, here's Chris DePerno's phone number. So.
Oh, no wonder why I get all these calls. I'm trying to figure out why you call me from all this halfway around the world or something. Any other questions?
That's it. I can give you more information later.
You got it. I'd love to sit and talk with you. Any other questions?
Ivor.
Yeah, so the photograph that you showed of the Kecksburg UFO on a truck, was that an actual photo or was it generated?
No, it hasn't been vetted. I will tell you that if a photo has been vetted or not, and then when I say to you, here's a photo, it hasn't been vetted, that means we don't know if it's the actual photo. We try to vet these photos, but sometimes you just can't. But to me, it looks like a legitimate photo. But I'm not going to sit here and say, this is the photo of what it actually looked like. However, based on the witnesses from Kecksburg, we do know it was the acorn /shape, bell-shaped type of thing. And they did say there was weird markings at the bottom. So we looked at that and trying to look at that. And then we put that with the Glock, because the people who I've talked about the Glock, and these are people who are from Poland and some other places, have said when the Glock was being tested, it was very unstable. And that goes back to the 0525, which was an element that they couldn't stabilize. And so they had these markings. And so the thing that we're concerned about, was there something from the occult that they put on these markings? Were these markings from an ancient religion? And we first thought maybe Sumerian markings or markings from something else. But as Tom said, when you look at Rendlesham and Jim Pendleton, he describes the craft the same type of markings or similar types of weird markings on it. So these markings have to be significant in some way, but we just don't know what it is.
Has anyone done a study of a three-body problem in terms of whether that Glock could have gone into space on a long orbit and then been recaptured by Earth's gravity, many years later, and then been drawn back into the Earth's orbit? Do you know of anybody?
Are you talking about the Glock?
Yes.
We don't know.
So my point is, let's say that the Germans were experimenting with it. They did not realize, the bandwidth of the power system. It shot out into space, and then went on a long elliptical orbit through the solar system. And an orbit is basically, it's coming back to its origin point. Got pulled in by the Earth's gravity, and then 20 years or 25 years later, after the Germans threw it into space, it got reconnected to Earth's gravity, got pulled back
Here-
in.
Here's my thing with that. That's a good theory, but I would say my argument with that is that when the Glock started to re-enter the atmosphere, it changed directions.
Right.
So if it was unstable and it decided to die out and come to Earth, how would it be able to change directions? Now, it didn't do it just once. It did it 3 times. Go ahead.
And so what I'm saying is that when it came back into Earth's orbit, it was influenced by the Earth's magnetosphere. And as a result of that magnetosphere, which maybe the Germans weren't aware of, that it was sensitive to the magnetosphere, it came back into the orbit and it was influenced by the magnetosphere. And it looked like it was changing directions, but actually it was being influenced by, by the magnetic sphere of the Earth. A lot of things on this planet, because of our iron nickel core, are influenced by the magnetosphere. Our planet is based, say, if you compare it to the moon, it's about 5 times denser than the moon, and that's why our gravity is much. So this is another thing that's been thrown out there. Some people have speculated that might be the situation. What we do know is that the military came, collected that thing up, and then denied that they'd ever done anything of the kind, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Here's
they
my
must have
question
known.
to you.
Go ahead.
Now you got me thinking that, wow, that's a good theory. So my question to you is, how high up or how low do you have to be in order for that your theory to affect the change of direction? Because if your theory is good, which I'd love to look into it, I would want to find out the exact height, or if there's some record of the trajectory and when it actually changed course, and if it fits your theory, because that's huge. Because if you're right, then you're saying that thing was unmanned, and that's a big thing. Because the theory has always been that the bell-shaped object, acorn that they want to call it, in Kecksburg, was a manned space flight or manned object that was there.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was an unmanned object, and I think that they knew they were tracking it. They knew it was out there, and it came in at a certain point. They knew it was coming, and that's why they were able to respond so fast. Because didn't they respond like within 6 or 8 hours? In recap,
they were pretty much Johnny on the spot. You're correct about that. But the question is, was it manned or was it remote controlled? And that's always been the theory because of the change of it. Now you brought a new theory into the project, which I'd like to look at, because if we could show or prove or disprove yours, it changes the whole ball of wax of Gettysburg.
And another thing to consider there, you're familiar with feedback, where you've got a speaker and a microphone, and then the two start pulling off of each other, and then you get that squeal, the feedback squeal. If this device, they were attempting, let's say they were only attempting to lift it 20 feet, and they did not realize that,
How powerful
how powerful it was, and it just shot up into space, and then 30 years later, whatever it was, Kecksburg was 64 or 65, wasn't it?
I think so.
Okay, so that's like 20 years. It could have gone into a long elliptical orbit, then been pulled back into the Earth's gravity. And if the propulsion system was sensitive to but to magnetic fields, even a slight influence could deviate its return. So it looked like it was moving around, but in fact, it was simply responding to the magnetic field that was influencing its propulsion system. Just a guess. Not a guess, but it's a speculation.
I'll tell you what, why don't you call me on that? And what I'll do is I'll start looking into that theory, because I'm not, one thing about me is that I always like to get different theories, because if you can disprove something or prove something by somebody else's theory, that's a benefit to everybody. So I think that's a great idea.
Okay, well, I thought that other people had already been talking about this. That's why I asked if you knew if there was anybody had tried to figure out whether an elliptical orbit, you know, uh, could happen that way. I'm not sure it can. It sounds like Velikovsky stuff, but
Well, let's find out.
yeah, let's find out.
Let's find out.
Well,
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yep, Jer's got his hand up. Jer has something he wants to say. So Jer, let's have it.
Yeah, so the photo of the Kecksburg Glock or whatever you want to call it, that looked like that was the one that they actually put up on display. They have next to the fire department out there. It's actually kind of neat. So that other close-up picture you got is the one that's on display as well. So that's what I'm thinking. There's a gentleman in Pennsylvania by the name of Stan Gordon. Chris, I'm sure you probably heard of him.
Yep.
He's big into Bigfoot, but he also does a lot of UFO stuff too. Anyhow, he was there and was a witness to that thing when it came down. And he was saying that most of those direction changes all happened while it was relatively close to the ground, like 1,000 feet or less. So I just thought I'd throw that out there and let you all know.
I'll have to hunt down Stan Gordon and talk to him about that because, you know, the theory that was just brought up, I want to look into it. It intrigues me, and you know, I don't want to rule that out. Still there, Jer? Jer?
Yep, still here. Yep, definitely.
Okay. So
Yep,
I mean,
StanGordonInfo.com, I believe, is his website. Let me look that up for you real quick.
yeah, I'll be able to get a hold of him. I got people who know him and contact him, and I'll start looking into that. But the thing is, what I'm more interested is, did the Nazis have the ability to defeat anti-gravity? And I believe they did. And I believe that there was a crash in Germany. And the reason I say that is because their propulsion theories and manufacturing jumped after that crash in 1936. I mean, it just started taking off at an amazing speed and stuff. So based on what they were doing and what they were working on, and what's been said by not one but two scientists, that, you know, hey, and then you got Rupert turning around confirming everything. That was the big thing with us, is that Rupert said, hey, look, these guys were so advanced that you would have thought that their stuff up in the sky was UFOs. So, you know, did we reverse engineer from the Germans? Did the Germans actually back engineer an alien craft, and did we steal that or take it, or, you know, got it from their scientists who were able to do that? And then maybe, as you said, with the rockets was a disinformation thing while we were working on anti-gravity all along. Yes.
Colonel Corso in the book, it was an interview that Paula did. I can't think of her last name right now, but Paula Harris, yeah. He said that the Foo Fighters were, in fact, and they knew at the time, were German vehicles, and that's what he said. They went on that basis from that time. They knew at that time that those things were German craft, and they weren't sure about their purpose. They thought it might have been intelligence gathering, you know, or something, but that was his position, and I happen to believe him because I read his book, and having worked in labs at the time, everything that he said was just like a president at the time reporting of what the technical culture looked like, you know, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I believe that those things were flying, that the Germans had made them. They probably destroyed all the documentation, but if that's the case, then they certainly had anti-gravity propulsion, and they had the ability to control unmanned vehicles. Just a thought.
Well, no, it's a good thought. And here's the thing. I believe that the Manta project, the Black Manta project, is real. And does anybody know Ken Jordan?
I don't know what that Black Manta project is.
That's the triangle.
Oh,
The
okay, right.
R3B.
Okay, right.
Its code name was the Black Manta Project. So
Okay.
anyways, the project, the TR3B, I talked to Ken Jordan. Ken Jordan used to be the state director of MUFON, but what people didn't know about Ken was in charge of the Army's Future Weapons Lab. And they were playing with plasma back in the 70s and 80s and stuff. And Ken said to me, he says, Chris, you know those TR3Bs are real. And the difference between our ships and the extraterrestrial ships are that those things are not lights in the triangle. Those are amplifiers, as Bob Lazar talked about with the sports model craft. Remember he talked about the amplifiers? Well, those amplifiers are in our crafts are at the bottom of the triangle. Now, the extraterrestrial says the ones that are we being visited are on the actual tips of the triangle. He says that's how you distinguish between extraterrestrial crafts and our craft. So the TR3B has the lights underneath, and the propulsion system is in the middle that works on electromagnetism. And like I said, Ken was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, retired honorably, and was in charge of the Army's Future Weapons Lab, which they went in and started working on all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah, I can tell you that, the technology that's out there, actually the technology that they're working on is always 20 years or more ahead of what we know about. And I can attest to that. I worked for Honeywell Avionics in 1980. I was sent over to a lab, which was differently named. And I found out later that that's common with big military industrial contractors. They'll create a company name. It'll be something innocuous like, whatever. And then in that lab, they're developing stuff. And it's the intention is that they're going to commercialize it, but oftentimes they are, it's also classified. So I was called over to this lab where a guy was doing work on lasers. And I went into the lab and there was a big hole in drywall. And apparently what had happened is he was, he didn't have his protective equipment up to catch the energy. He made some kind of error and it set off a burst of laser energy that burned a dish-sized hole in plasterboard. Now, if you know, okay, so you're familiar with plasterboard, right? It doesn't burn. All right. That stuff doesn't burn. You throw it on a charcoal grill, it's just the paper that surrounds it, but the stuff itself doesn't really burn very well. And this laser that was in 1980 blew a dish size hole in a plasterboard wall. So that's what they were working on. Honeywell was working on in 1980, and now it's 2024. Think how long that's been in development. Sure. And now they're saying that they've got them on satellites up there. They've got these laser beams, which are anti-satellite devices, and they're saying that they are actually, we have them in space now, to destroy satellites if it comes to that.
Well, here's something that adds to your theory. So one of the most secret labs in the world was in plain sight in New York, in Tuxedo Park. You ever heard of Tuxedo Park?
Yep.
Okay, so there was a billionaire by the name of Alfred Loomis. He was a brilliant physicist. And Tuxedo Park Lake, to this day, you can't enter that village. It's a public village. They have their own police force there. But as you come up to the gates, you are met by police officers there. They ask you what's your business, and you have to be escorted in and out of that village. And so one of the things was the tower building, which was a secret lab run by Livermore. Livermore was actually invented there, and MIT worked down there. They were working years ago. They were working on radar, and they were trying to brought British scientists over to work on radar. Well, as they were working on radar, somehow or another, the beam went into the lake and it fried all these fish. And they said, holy cow, we got a direct energy weapon here. I mean, the fish just started popping up fried already. And they realized that this radar, however they developed what it was, they used it as a direct energy weapon, that they invented it and we're working on it. And to this day, there are people in the park that tell me, yeah, there's a rock inside the park that they melted, from this direct energy weapon. So it's one of those things where you go, holy cow, and then we have found, to verify this, we have found old Jeeps with U.S. Air Force stickers on them in the backwoods, abandoned, just rusted out. And they actually have missile program or missile command right on the thing. So, I mean, why would U.S. Air Force Jeeps be abandoned in this, village that's closed off to everybody? And they used to have what they call think tanks there. And the retired chief of police there told me that they were working on time and space years ago in that park. So, I mean, they brought in some of the most brilliant students from around the country and have them sit down there and say, okay, how do we bend space and time? So, yeah, I'm sure that lasers were doing their thing years and years and years ago. Remember, most people say that what we know about is really 100 years back of what really they have. So the Black Ops projects are 100 years more advanced than what we see.
Is it that far out? 100 years? Yeah,
that's what I've been told. Remember, okay. I was overseas in 1973. 1973, I was working in an embassy there, and the CIA had cell phones. So, I mean, I watched the chief of station pull out a cell phone.
Cell phone or satellite phone? What do you know?
Either one. It was
satellite phone. I think they had those back then.
Yeah. So I mean, he pulled it out, and I go, well, maybe I shouldn't ask him what this was and stuff. But I mean, so technology, what we see is really something that they don't want to use. Remember what Ben Rich said: if you can think of that, we've already done it, or we decided it's not worth doing because we got something better. So, those are the things that you want to look at and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that Victor Schaumburg claimed that the Foo Fighters were his. And in one of his books, he actually shows what they were, and he said they were radio controlled.
I wouldn't doubt it, because, like I said, there is absolute. Many people have said and testified the fact that the Nazis developed anti-gravity and actually flew either jet propulsion discs or anti-gravity discs. And it's not just one time. They had like 2 to 3 successful flights.
Yeah.
So, any other questions? Oh, wow. I better work on my program a little more.
Well, not a question. I just want to say thanks for a fascinating presentation, and I very much
nobody talks
it.
about the German things. I mean, we all talk about UFOs, but I have to tell you, I'm still working on this program. But if you really delve into, like you did with Schallenberg and Klein and all these other guys, their science was so dramatic. And, even though they were under a monster and kept, in captivity, they really were, they developed some of the most amazing string theory and quantum mechanics. To this day, we still are working on what they started developing.
Well, yeah, and I'll throw this out too, because I thought of this earlier as you're talking about the Kecksburg thing, and I was thinking, what if instead of, like Ivor said, it was on a great big orbit, what if it wasn't on an orbit, and what if they actually did break that time barrier, and that had actually left from Germany and hadn't left that long and got back to Kecksburg not too long after it left, you know what I mean? So through the time barrier.
Well, they have strong belief that Nazis were working on time and space, and if maybe they conquered it, it'd be an interesting thing to know if they actually did. It just strikes me very funny that Werner von Braun would write a book about going to Mars after his teacher wrote a book about interplanetary travel. But the main person that talks about going to Mars in his book is a man by the name of Elon. Now, what is Elon doing now? And you know who actually came up with this theory is Bob Spearing.
Oh, okay.
As you know, but this wasn't my theory. Bob Spearing says, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And I go, "That's fascinating." That he would pick a name like Elon. You would think, how would you pick a name like that? But he truly believes that Elon soars in the future, accomplishes going back in time, and doing this, and that they reported it back then. Crazy theory as it is, I'm not saying that it couldn't happen.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe Elon is an ancient Egyptian name too. And for those of you who may not know, when he said Bob Spearing, that's MUFON's Director of International Investigations. So he's one of our top guys in MUFON.
So, and then remember Ken St. John?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So Ken St. John firmly believed and told us that they conquered teleportation. And now we see that actually they've released that they've been able to teleport cells and do that. But he says Area 51, they have actual teleportation there, that they go from Area 51 to Pine Gap. I don't, and Ken St. as you know, Ken St. John was a person who was involved with a lot of things.
Yep. And Joe's got a question again.
Not a question. I was
Or
going
comment.
to say, on teleportation, Hal Puthoff penned the formula for it, and it was released in 2004. So that means they've gone way beyond that now.
Oh, yeah.
But it's something I knew when I was in high school. So, and it's something that I dealt with when I was in the Air Force.
What did you do in the Air Force?
I was in military intelligence. And for part of my time in the Air Force, I was stationed with Caucasian aliens.
With who?
Rings of Saturn. In the rings of Saturn.
You were, say that again.
I was stationed with Caucasian aliens in the rings of Saturn.
Caucasian aliens that look like us?
They look like us. Their eyes are a little bit bigger than ours.
Wow.
I'm going to connect you guys by email so you can chat about that. But Ivor's got a question or comment.
Yeah, I had forgotten this earlier. You had said that the guy that that's working with anticipates we're just like a few months shy of full disclosure. And what do you mean by full disclosure? That the government's going to open everything up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, about the earliest it can happen would be if the Senate holds hearings in November and December after the election, and these hearings bring out enough information that the President of the United States can go on the air and make the announcement that we are not alone.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. I got to go now. See you guys.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Okay, well, in my opinion, I'm assuming I don't see any other questions. I think that Chris deserves a big round of applause because I think everybody really enjoyed that presentation. So let's give Chris a big round of applause. I'm seeing the chat.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate that. And listen, Tom, keep in touch with me. Guys, if you want my number, get it from Tom. I'm always happy to take questions. And, like I said before, and I'll say it again, there's no expert in this because as we know, we learn this stuff every single day. Something else comes out.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chris. Really enjoyed it.